Good to go whenever you're ready.
I am ready. Sit down talking. Welcome, everybody. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Public Safety Committee for December 10th, 2024, our last meeting of the year. The third item is changes to the agenda. And before we get to the third item, I'd like to change the order of the second item, public comment. I know there's some people here from the public who may have been at our last legislature meeting. And before we receive public comment, and I want to receive it, I wanted to give the sheriff a chance to share some information, and that may inform the comments we receive. I don't want to hold anybody up, but I thought this would make it into more of a discussion. So, Sheriff.
Yeah. Brittany, if you wouldn't mind pulling up. Rich, thank you for the opportunity to speak, and I'll start, whoever's here to maybe talk about this comment. I appreciate the input and the statements we received, and what I hope to do today is just go down a case-by-case basis of every incident that was reported to us and how we responded and what was done as a result of it. I hope it sheds some light on things that were done, but that'll be up to the people to decide. I'll start by saying,
This is the incident in the town of Danby.
Yeah, sorry, I should have preferenced that.
It's okay.
I assume we all knew that what we were talking about. Caroline, yes, thank you.
Caroline, sorry.
Yes. I got into this job 26 years ago because I genuinely care about people. Not taking action in a law enforcement thing is completely counterintuitive to what I stand for as a person, and I think I've got a pretty strong reputation in the community for holding my people accountable, even when it's come down to arresting my own staff members, which has happened at least twice since I've been sheriff. To start off with, you can see on the screen, and I've got a print copy because I can't read something that far away. Our first involvement, and I should preface this with saying that I don't have access to any incidences that were maybe responded to by the state police. They're a completely separate entity. They don't share their information with us. So I cannot provide any detail regarding anything they may or may not have responded to. However, our first response was on October 28th of 2022. At that time, it was reported that the suspect had yelled at the residents of that property using profanity and racial slurs. At the time, the victim of that incident didn't want action taken initially, wanted the suspect spoken to. However, we did file a charge for harassment second right off the get-go. At that point in time, that is the only possible charge we could have charged him with. That's it. We're strapped by what the law says, and that was the best fitting charge, and that's what we did. We did not respond again until August 22nd of 23. At that point, is a very similar incident. The suspect stopped his ATV in front of the victim's home and again made harassing and racist comments. Video surveillance or video evidence was available from the victim at that time. We discussed the case with the DA's office. Unfortunately, we did not have enough to meet the qualification to file a hate crime charge, but we did ask about it in an attempt to make a case for it. So we were left with, again, charging the suspect with harassment second. That was the best and most egregious charge that the law fit at that time. Based on all that, on December 11th of 23, and based on our arrest, we were able to get an order of protection for the victim on behalf of her and her entire family to give us a little more meat in case an incident happens again, that we could potentially charge him with a higher level crime, which is violating the order of protection, which is referred to as criminal contempt. On October 14th, 23, it was reported to us that the victim's fence was spray painted sometime during the overnight hours. Unfortunately, there was not video evidence of that incident. There were no witnesses, and interview of the suspect, he denied involvement. There was no probable cause at that time to substantiate arrest. And if I could stop there for a second and just explain a little bit about probable cause. That's the standard we need to make an arrest, which is based off evidence. When it gets to the DA's office, there's even a higher level that the DA's got to meet above and beyond what we have to meet just to make the arrest. I can't tell you how many times in all my years I've seen suspects have it be reported that a suspect committed an offense, and I know in my heart, you know, that I know that person committed it. That's not probable cause, unfortunately. You could look at an incident and say, okay, the suspect did something before that that was similar. Maybe he did it 10 times. That's still not probable cause. I can't tell you, again, how many times I've investigated things where it just tugs at your heartstring because you know that person is guilty, but it doesn't meet the level of probable cause to make an arrest. That's just the way it is. January 17th of 24, very similar incident again. It was reported that spray paint was this time found on a car. Again, there was no video evidence, there was no witnesses, and again, the suspect denied involvement. We again consulted with the district attorney's office, and unfortunately, there just was not, again, probable cause to substantiate an arrest. If you could turn the slide. Oh, you got it? Thank you. I told you I can't read that far away, so thanks for bearing with me. February 14th of this year, the victim reported that the suspect had erected a fence. About 1 foot of it was on her property. We again consulted the DA, and a charge could not be substantiated. We were able to convince him to remove the fencing, and then we, in working with the victim, who wanted a survey done at her property, we had deputies back out there to keep the peace while that was done. February 17th, a few days later, this thing, at the time things elevated a little bit. She reported damage to an outside light near her chicken coop, and it was determined to have been damaged by a pellet gun. This time the investigation provided probable cause needed to substantiate charges of criminal contempt second, which is again a violation of an order of protection, and criminal mischief, which is damaging somebody's property. The order of protection this time was updated. This was the second time, and we were able to get the court to issue us a firearm surrender, and we responded back to the suspect's home and recovered 4 different firearms, including the pellet gun. March 26, the victim reported that the suspect had been on her property. There was pictures provided that showed the suspect on his side of the fence, and there was no indication that he was on her property at that time. Again, there was no probable cause to substantiate an arrest, and the victim asked us to document it and not to interview him at that time. Last slide, June 26. The victim reported that she heard the neighbor yelling from his property. And unfortunately, the words that were yelled were not decipherable. She believed it to be about her, and there's probably a good chance that it was. However, it didn't meet the probable cause standard to make an arrest. And it should be noted that he claimed that he was yelling at his television set. Of course, we can know certain things in our heart, like I said, but we can't prove or disprove that in any way. July 8th, again, the victim reported the suspect was yelling from his property and believed he was talking about her. There was no probable cause to substantiate an arrest. On August 29th, in speaking with the victim in consultation with the DA, additional information was obtained. And I'm not going to go into details on this case because it is an active case, and I don't want to do anything or say anything to jeopardize that as it goes through the court system. At that time, we were able to charge the suspect with stalking fourth, the hate crime section, and the criminal contempt second for violating the order of protection again. And I will mention, you know, the stalking fourth, that is a case that, or a charge that comes with ongoing patterns of behavior that we didn't have in previous incidences. But by then, with the additional information learned and in consultation with the DA and the victim, we were able to make that charge. That is the summary of every incident we've responded to and what we handled. Just to summarize, we made multiple arrests, 2 right off the get-go. It was our office that initiated the order of protections and the firearms confiscation. We've provided extra patrols throughout the entire process in that area. We typically have 3 to 4 deputies on in the county at any given time, and deputies are making continual checks there. They have from the get-go, and they're doing that now since we learned that he'd been released from jail. We also, in really reviewing this hate crime statute, we had the opportunity to meet with Senator Leah Webb, meaning the district attorney and myself, and the standards to meet a hate crime are dictated by specified offenses that have to be met, which are all high-level charges that we simply just did not have in any of these cases. And I'm not going to read them all to you, but they are spelled out in the penal law. Our recommendation to her, upon being asked what the senator's office could do, was to relax the standards of what is required for a specified offense and a hate crime charge, and that's where we left that. So that's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff. I appreciate you weighing in first. And Matt, I'd give you a chance. Is there anything you'd like to add, particularly about the judge's decision and bail reform? That it seems like the judge had some obligation to consider bail in this circumstance.
Sure. Well, I'll start out by saying that I think since the early summer, maybe late spring of 24 until to date, Derek and I have probably talked. There was a period of time where we were talking multiple times a day, and certainly talking very regularly about this case and these cases, and so I think that's important to note that we have been in regular communication about this. Bail reform has no relation whatsoever to a case like this, because it is, number one, it's a he was found guilty of a crime, and the question of the sentence that was imposed was for violation of a conditional discharge. So when he initially pled guilty to a misdemeanor, he was given a conditional discharge by the Caroline Town judge. That means essentially honor the order of protection and follow the rules and laws of New York State for a period of 1 year. If you don't do that, then you could be resentenced, and the possibilities of resentencing included 3 years probation or up to 365 or 364 days in jail. He ultimately did violate the conditional discharge, and that was the basis of the sentence of the 364 days. His attorneys appealed that sentence and that proceeding based upon the fact that he was found to have violated the conditional discharge without any testimony at all from any of the victims, any ability to cross-examine the victim. And that was the basis of the appeal, which Judge Cassidy granted bail on that. And that is, as a matter of due process, when you are sentenced to a local jail sentence and there's an appeal, it's very common that a county judge will grant bail, because if you were to win the appeal, for example, and you've already served your 364 days, you don't get that back. So it's a matter of due process to at least consider bail, and Judge Cassidy was within the law to consider bail. We opposed it, and he still decided to grant the bail, and that was how Mr. Whitaker was released last week.
Okay. Well, thank you both. And now I'd proceed to public comment, and I have one blue sheet, but if anybody else wishes to address, Mike.
Do we get to ask questions at this point, or do you want to wait till the actual meeting?
Do you have a question?
I do.
Ask a question.
Okay. Actually, I just have 2 questions. One is for the sheriff. Did all charges stem from the sheriff's department? I know you don't know about what happened with the
charges that I just went through and the thing, they were all sheriff's office charges. I do not know if the state police filed charges or not. I have no idea.
That is correct. All the charges came through the sheriff's office. I know that the state police responded to calls, and that's not uncommon for them to go out to somewhere in the county to do that.
My other question for you, Matt, is, I mean, harassment charge seems pretty serious. I mean, it's not nothing. I mean, what kind of, so there were 2 harassment charges. Were these all kind of bundled in together? And then there was a violation of restraining order. That also sounds kind of serious. What are you looking at with something like that?
Well, harassment in the second degree is actually, it's a low-level offense. It's a violation-level offense. It is not a misdemeanor.
Okay.
It's considered a violation similar to disorderly conduct or trespassing, and that is not eligible to be treated or to be escalated as a hate crime. It's not one of the listed crimes that does qualify as a hate crime. So the stalking charge that we talked about and were able to ultimately bring is eligible to be treated as a hate crime, and we do believe that that fit as a hate crime. But in levels of seriousness, harassment is a lower level offense, and especially when there is verbal threats or verbal harassment, verbal epithets and things of that nature, that was the appropriate charge at the beginning. It gave rise to an order of protection, which was ultimately violated. That's a misdemeanor charge. So things escalated, and it's very common for there to be gradually increasing seriousness as a situation is not, I mean, so often someone who's charged with a violation says, oh my God, this is bad, I need to stop doing what I'm doing. And that didn't happen in this case. And then when you add misdemeanor charges, which require the person to be fingerprinted and photographed and issued a legal order from the court restricting behavior, that's very serious, and so many people take that seriously, but some people don't. And when alcohol is involved and substance abuse is involved, that aggravates the circumstances. And so the process of the charges that were filed and the court system, it takes time for cases to be prosecuted in court. The harassment charge that was filed at the end of 2022, it didn't go into court until the end of the year, just because the court system works slowly. There's one day per month that is scheduled for everyone to appear in Caroline Town Court with our office. So it is a gradually increasing level of charges, and so we're still prosecuting the stalking charge now. That's going through the court system in Caroline, as well as the appeal.
All right, thanks, man.
Okay. All right. Jonna.
I have one other question. I guess my question stems from the fact that clearly there's a sense that there are some law concerns that are being broken. Would this also be eligible for a civil case?
Well, yes. In fact, there is a civil case, and that is ongoing. It's not something that my office is directly involved in, but I'm aware of it. And to the extent that we can support that case, we are doing that. We've had communications with the civil attorneys. I understand that there was a motion to dismiss that case that was denied. So that case is going on, and that's, I think, in federal court.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Okay. Veronica.
Can I ask a question to maybe the whole committee and attendees, anticipating maybe some of the public comment? I hear people questioning, or heard people questioning, like, did our employees do their jobs that they were supposed to do? And also a stepped back broader question of are our residents feeling safe in their homes? And the answer could very much be yes, but no. Yes, everyone did what they were supposed to do, and yet the outcome wasn't what we're all striving for. And so I'm wondering if is the space for the broader public safety collectively conversation, would, not necessarily in this moment, but would this committee be the place for that? Like, if the laws as written and enforced and everything are failing someone in, this is one case, but I know it's not unique. I was going to say we're not changing laws here, but we can. We're lawmakers, just not.
Yeah, if I can try to answer your several questions, because there's a lot to think about here. I'm not sure committee can solve this, but my hope was in sharing the information and then taking public comment. We continue a dialogue and we hear people. That's, I think, the best we can do today, but if there's further actions we can consider, we certainly can talk about them. But that's what I was trying to do.
I think to answer your question, I don't think it's fair to say that the sheriff's office did anything wrong. They did their jobs appropriately. They responded. You know, when young deputies go out and they are less experienced, they may not have as much of an ability to explain the law to people as more experienced deputies. I don't know what was specifically said or not said at any point in that interaction. My office made a mistake last week for which I am solely responsible, and that was not notifying Amanda that Mr. Whitaker was released from jail. That was a mistake. It was a screw up. How that could be addressed, and I've been thinking a lot about it and talking about it with people. As you all know, that we are understaffed, and we've been understaffed. When we're at full staff, we're understaffed. And part of our job is to communicate with victims and to notify them about important information like this, and we did not do that in this case. And part of that's because we are 2 attorneys short, and another attorney's mother is seriously ill and she has been out of the office, and we are scrambling to meet all our obligations. That is not an excuse, but the fact is that if we had a dedicated victim advocate in our office to be making those phone calls and doing that communication and helping with that issue, that would significantly improve our ability to ensure that things like that don't happen in the future.
Yeah. And Matt, you know, as an attorney, I'd like to say I never made a mistake. I've made lots of mistakes, and my view of your work in your office and your team is that you try really hard and you do a really good job. And I acknowledge that you have admitted something here, and that's good. That's how we improve. So why don't we proceed to public comment? Let's hear from the public.
Okay.
Do you have more?
Just, I want to clarify, I am not trying to say that any of our county staff has like messed up or done something wrong. I'm asking, can we hold that it could be that all the individuals did just what they were supposed to, and yet the outcome wasn't what we wanted, and sort of take this in with a systemic look and not necessarily a blaming look. And that, like, Matt, your point that like if you had a victim advocate in your office, something might have gone different. That would be like an example of what could be different that doesn't have anything to do with someone messed up, because there is not that role. So we can't say someone messed up if there was no someone.
And we're starting to look into that. There's Office of Victim Services, a New York State agency that potentially would be a source of a grant for that. Assuming we get to keep
I
our
like
grant.
the sound of that. Yeah. Yes. Okay. I have a blue sheet from Amanda Kirchkestner. Why don't you come up and talk with us? And you understand the rules. I'll put the clock on.
No fighting, no yelling. All right, thanks for being here today. I love to see accountable leadership. It's one thing I find really absent in most of the county departments I've been navigating lately. But I love that Derek Osborne and his undersheriff are here, and the district attorney taking responsibility for not communicating to Amanda David what New York State totally allows for. I don't know if most people in this room know how quickly the court system moves. It moves really fast. It is really whirlwind sometimes. I've been working one-on-one with some clients who are deeply involved with it. You want to get things done, talk to a court clerk. It gets done before 8:30 in the morning. It's crazy, it's wild, love it. But I would like to invite the county legislature into the fight, and please communicate with Anna Kellis and Leah Webb about how awful bail reform is and how it's actually harming people who need to be protected by the law. Please issue some type of statement to the governor about how devastating it is when community members are impacted in such a harmful way. Amanda David deserves to feel safe. Absolutely. But everybody is doing their job except for maybe the people who are holding higher office and advocating for legal policy that allows people who cause harm to continue to do harm. It really sucks. It really sucks, and I invite my white allies here to actually get into the fight, please. Leah Webb and Anna Kellis could absolutely do something to advocate from the bluest dot in New York State to help create a meaningful change. I know this guy would love to work with them. I know that guy would love to work to them. And if people aren't clear on who I'm indicating our sheriff who is elected. I'm indicating our district attorney who is elected. They would love to help Leah Webb and Anna Kellis create meaningful structural change that would allow them to protect people in our county. They're not to blame. The law is. And these guys will help you create meaningful policy if you're willing to stop blaming them and actually start working with them. Legislature, your job is to listen and help mediate and advocate from your seats at the table, representing the interests of the people who live within your districts and working across these county departments, which are doing their darndest right now to help provide for people who are finding themselves in code blue, by and large. You know, there's that going on. I understand that a lot of the county's policies are structured in such a way to keep you guys from assuming liability. Good Lord, but I would strongly suggest you start actually working for the people and working for the bottom line and actually looking at how we can create meaningful change here. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Next up, Irene Weiser.
Great, thanks. And thanks everyone for being here and taking up this issue. I just jotted down quickly some questions that I'll put forward that maybe you guys can follow up on. And so just full disclosure here, I spoke with Matt yesterday, I spoke with Derek Friday, I think it was. I appreciate the time that both of them gave me. And so I think I want to start, Matt, just, you know, some of it is just to put some of the conversation that we had out in space here, is to ask these questions. What is usually done in regard to victim notification? And how do you usually ensure that victim notification is happening? And then you spoke about, in particular, something called VineNet and the need to register people for VineNet. And I wonder if your office has checked into ensuring that all of the victims that you're serving right now have been offered the opportunity to register for VineNet, because that is a system that would notify. So whether that's been done. We also talked yesterday about how slow the process is, you know, to ensure that people have their due process rights and, you know, whatever other things kind of get in the way. But we also talked about how the court might work better. And I told you that this is something back when I was on town board, which is, you know, it's quite a while ago now, but we had looked back then. There was a report done, I don't remember who issued the report, whether it was out of the county ledge or out of TCOG or where it came from. But there was research into consolidation and possibly district court. And so I wondered if you could speak to those concepts a bit, Matt. And I know some consolidation has happened, and there may be more kind of district court stuff to think about. And also, Matt, if you could describe what kind of work actually does need to be done if you were to have somebody providing victim services? What are the kind of things that they would be doing? And just in general, what level of staffing do you think you would need to do that work? And Sheriff, I have a couple of things for you. These are not firsthand. They would be, in any kind of court considered hearsay, and they're sort of third-hand hearsay. But I do just want to put it out there that I've heard from some folks on Amanda's team that there was some communication that in my view of hearing what got said, it's disturbing to hear, and I don't know firsthand.
If you could wrap it up.
Yeah, I'm getting there. So the comments were told to Amanda that it wasn't a hate crime unless Amanda had been named, and apparently she heard that multiple times from different people that responded. Also, somebody had advised her when the light had been shot out, when the security light had been shot out, that she should try harder to be a better neighbor and to make friends. And so, to me, those kind of comments, I heard them years ago when I worked in the domestic violence arena. So it makes me wonder what training may be needed to bring people up to speed on sort of the ways to respond to victims. And I also wonder, and this is a broader question for everybody, is what's the role of the Criminal Justice Center in monitoring and ensuring justice for victims? So thank you for listening to the questions and allowing me to rattle on, Rich. Thanks.
You're welcome. Thanks for coming in and talking with us. Is there anybody else who'd like to address the committee? Right.
Rich?
Yeah.
As long as we're on the topic.
You bet.
And, just one of the most useful reports that I see on the Public Safety Committee is our TomStat report that comes in from emergency response. I just want to call out a couple things from this month's report. Our police agencies in the month of November responded to 65 disputes, 104 domestic incidents, 136 harassment calls, 160 thefts, and 60 trespassing. Those are just cherry picking 5 topics, but it should give us an idea of the large volume of calls that our criminal justice system is involved with, and thinking about some of the solutions that Matt is suggesting and others, you could keep victims assistance folks pretty busy just based on follow-up to the volume of calls that these police agencies are handling. And it's not as though this is an isolated incident. You're seeing literally hundreds of complaints and quality of life issues and people who are feeling probably unsafe at the time they call 911. So just as we talk about these things, keep in mind the amount of volume that's going on in this county of 105,000 people. Thanks.
Thank you, Lee. And I agree with you. It's on page 40 of our agenda packet. This is a really useful report to give some sense of the temperature of the community. And I tend to look at harassment, disorderly conduct, assault, and just give me some sense of how angry people are out there. And there's a lot of it.
These numbers have grown significantly since I was in the office, starting to generate some of these numbers, and really there's a lot there that just most people wouldn't even realize what goes on in just one day's time.
Yeah. Okay. Anything further on that topic? Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Derek, for focusing on it. We have minutes from October 22nd, 2024. Could I get a motion on the minutes? Mike moves, Veronica seconds. Questions or comments on the minutes? All right, we're all here. We can vote by hand. All those in favor? That's unanimous. We have some appointments. We have two people to the CJATI. One is Sharon Brown from College Initiative Upstate, and Deanna Bodner from DSS, as the DSS rep. Deanna has been on the CJATI committee, and Sharon is new. I know both of them. I think they'd be excellent, one continuing, one new. Could I get a motion to, Lee moves, Shauna seconds. Any discussion? Do we need to go into executive session? Are we ready to vote? All those in favor? Thank you, everybody. That's unanimous. Chair's report. On page 9 of the packet, I just put in a page I got off the internet noting there's some pretty significant changes proposed for OSHA fire brigade standards. And if you get into the world of standard creation, which I used to work in, it's pretty elaborate and inside baseball, but it can have remarkable consequences spilling out. And in very rough summary, the fire brigade standards haven't been significantly updated in a long time. And the idea behind the standards is to make sure that fire brigades are operating in a safe and efficient manner. But they also should be accounting for changes in, say, the materials that firefighters will encounter inside a burning structure, as an example. These are really significant changes, and that's good in a way in that we want to keep our firefighters safe. But at the same time, we have volunteer fire departments that are under tremendous pressure, financial and otherwise, to maintain volunteers, and making it more difficult and adding on new training requirements. You know, there's a real trade-off there. And so I wanted to bring it to everybody's attention and to also invite a discussion and think about, should we be doing something in regard to this? OSHA has a public comment period. I believe that's gone by, but we could still introduce certainly our position on what we would like to see happen. Lee, I know you're far more versed on these standards than I am, but I'd invite you to talk to them or anybody else.
I know some subject matter experts that may be able to provide us with some succinct points that answer that. But yeah, it's daunting looking at what the recommendations are and what they may mean in particular to volunteer fire departments, not just the rural ones, but any of them across the board. So,
yeah, certainly this is an area where counties have not been directly involved, that the firefighting has been concentrated at the city, town level and village, but it may be coming to us if we see a large-scale collapse of the ability of those municipalities to do it. Mike?
Well, I don't know if not ability to do it. I'm just wondering, is there anything we can do? I mean, all of these departments have to do this. And does it require more training? And if so, maybe that's the role the county does. Is, I mean, we could provide a countywide training for all these separate, different volunteer if they all have to do the same thing. Or is it not a training issue? Is it some other issue?
training is one of many topics. Administrative aspects, record keeping, providing of safety gear, codifying best practices or recommended practices, and once those go into OSHA regulations, then it puts people into a lot larger compliance mix than maybe what has traditionally been there, and it becomes a point of manageability. Training is one aspect, but actually we have very strong training support through DOER.
Okay.
And I realize I said OSHA without naming the acronym Occupational Safety and Health Administration, a federal agency. Lisa.
So just a reminder that the county does have its own firefighting operations at the airport, which is often subject to these same regulations. So getting the heads up on this, I will forward it to our airport director and see what kind of implications it may have. And I know a training school or, is maybe one of several different considerations that the airport is looking at for the repurposing of the customs facility. So in the future, that may, I know it's one of many, but that may come into further conversation.
Yeah, I think looking forward, to the extent these regulations come into effect, it would be a really good idea for us as a county to think about how do we support our firefighters to make sure we've got that capability in our county. Yeah. And it is broad, it is training, but it's a lot more than that. It's equipment, it's lots of good things to have, but expensive things. So, anything further on that? I mean, a little bit of joy at the end of the, holiday season or whatever.
Well, thanks for putting it on the radar.
Yeah, okay. Next up is County Administration. Lisa, welcome.
Thanks, Rich.
And I note last Public Safety Committee meeting. Yeah.
That's my swan song.
You can still come. You can still come.
Thank you for the open invitation. The only item that I have on the agenda is the revising of the bylaws for the CJATI, Criminal Justice Alternatives to Incarceration Committee. My understanding is that the changes to the bylaws simply clarified the membership.
Yeah, why don't we get it on the floor? This is approval of updated amended bylaws, Criminal Justice Alternatives to Incarceration Advisory Board, Doc ID 12872. Veronica moves, Shauna seconds. Questions, comments? I do attend those meetings, and I would say, yeah, these are not, they should not be controversial updates to the bylaws. Veronica.
I didn't think there would be, but just looking at this first page, there's mentions of the county executive, which we don't have anyone by that title. Is that defined somewhere?
Actually, executive powers are granted to the county administrator under the charter.
There you go. Thank you.
Whew, nice catch. Yeah. All right. Anything else? Are we ready to vote?
I'm going to throw it back at Lisa on her way out the door here.
All those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. All right. Anything further from county administration? Lisa, as we do get to the end of the year, thank you for your support of the Public Safety Committee.
Thank you, Rich.
Next up is our Sheriff's Office.
Yeah, thanks, Rich. I only have a couple things to add. You have our written report. Hopefully you had an opportunity to review it. A couple points to make. All our inmates have been returned to Tompkins County from Cayuga with the conclusion of our renovation work. We are also excited, and I think I've mentioned it briefly in the past, but New York State Division of Criminal Justice Services had contacted us in regards to our crisis alternative response and engagement team and are funding a study with RIT in Rochester. We drove up a couple weeks ago, the care team, the undersheriff, myself, and our road patrol lieutenant, met with the professor that'll be taking on the study. That was a really neat meeting. I've never been involved in an academic study to this extent, so it was kind of cool. So we're looking forward to see what comes out of that, and we obviously will share that with the legislature as information rolls in. Our second care team, thanks to the legislature helping us out in funding in the grant that was received, is in training right now. We're using the resource of the first team to onboard the second team. They started this week. Right now, they are also working 9 to 5 during the daytime for this training process, and we hope to move them later into the evening to get better coverage with the care teams as time moves on. Last thing is our deputy sheriff PT test, physical fitness test for new hires is this weekend, and we're hoping to fill the last couple positions we have open, so that's it at this point.
Okay. How many positions do you have open? Or?
Two? Two, yeah.
Okay. I did have a question on page 28 of the packet. There's a photograph. Is that Cortland in the background? Cortland football field?
Yes, they host the annual first responder game there at SUNY Cortland Stadium.
So that's touch football?
Yes.
Okay.
And we're undefeated, just to throw that out there.
Thank you for sharing. Lee?
Two things. Are you a Cortland alumnus, or?
No, I'm not. But I can tell you why I know that, because my father, and I'm going to brag here, like undefeated, was the New York State high jumping champion in his 80s. And that's where he competed. So
The game was actually organized and started by some SUNY Cortland students who are sports management majors. They reached out to us 3 years ago to put together this game for charity, and it's been successful.
okay.
A question for Derek, and I'm just torn every year during Cortica, by the way, having attended there, but local loyalties. Renovations, how do they make out? Are you satisfied with the improvements that were made, and what's it doing to improve the life of those that we're hosting?
Well, I don't think that was really the intent of the work that was done for the benefit of the inmates at this point. A lot of it was mechanical type issues to get the work, when there's problems with infrastructure and things like that, facilities can make repairs a lot easier. The kitchen was probably the biggest change as far as appearance, but I got to say a lot of the work that was done doesn't change anything, appearance-wise. It was more like mechanical things like I mentioned. But yeah, everybody did a great job. They were there today throwing some grass seed down outside in straw from the damage from the dumpsters. But we've been happy with the progress. Everything looks great. The communication was excellent. Our relative facilities did a great job communicating with us. And Cuyahoga County, I got to thank them for taking all these inmates. Of course, it did help the sheriff's budget in Cuyahoga County, so I shouldn't thank him too much. But he still cooperated with us. So yeah, very satisfied.
That was a $4 million project, correct?
I believe that,
folds in.
I don't know the numbers offhand. You folks would know better than me.
It was in that neighborhood, yes.
Yeah.
So that folds into some future,
Yeah.
meant to, just for the record's sake, it's meant
Yes.
to support activities that may be on the horizon.
Correct. As far as possible, what we tried to do is to do things that would be preserved through any further construction so that we wouldn't lose the value. But these were urgent attention, things that just really needed attention. One of the things, I think the inmate showers were worked on, weren't they?
Yeah, the inmate showers, thank you, Rich, for helping me remember that. And as well as the holding areas when people come in for cap court when they're first charged. Originally, we only had one big cell for that. Now we have three that are each outfitted with restrooms and a sink, and much more comfortable environment in that regard, and safer for us and our staff.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for our sheriff? All right. Next up, District Attorney. Welcome again, Matt.
Thanks, Rich. I have to be in court at 2, so I'm going to apologize and cut out. Just a couple of quick things to Irene's questions. I think there was a study at some point about a district court, and I've reviewed a study that Orleans County did more recently in the last 12 months. I think I passed it on to the committee. It would essentially consolidate all the town courts so that lawyer judges would hear criminal cases as opposed to the town judges in Caroline or other municipalities. I think it would be a good thing. Ultimately, it would require a lot of legal work and resolutions and referendums, but I think it would provide a level of consistency in how cases were administered by lawyer judges as opposed to lay judges. So I'm definitely in favor of looking at that more carefully in the future. Second question about a victim advocate. We used to have one probably 15 years ago, before I was DA. And that person would be a full-time person in the DA's office who would communicate with victims, would give them advice, would collect documentation from them, medical records, receipts for restitution, just make all the calls that we, the attorneys, are making now. I'm making them, we all make them, and it's, you know, it would be a huge relief to have someone who was helping with those things on a full-time basis. And I think that that would be fully grant funded through the Office of Victim Services. So we're actively working on that process now. And there's just finally, before I came here, I was from 12 to 12:50 something. I was in a webinar on about a restorative justice grant that I'm going to pursue to establish a restorative justice program in Tompkins County. In October, I hosted a 3-day training that was put on by the Center for Court Innovation. They came up from New York City to put on the training. Dan participated from Probation, as well as my whole office and some other community partners. That was a grant that I had to apply for, and I got, and it's a stepping stone to getting this financial grant, which would be $250,000 to establish a restorative justice program that I think would be a huge addition to our justice system in Tompkins County. So I'm hopeful for that. The grant's not due until next February, but I'm working on it now.
Okay. All right. Questions or comments for our district attorney? Hey, Matt, I know you need to go to court, but thanks for visiting with us. Thanks for sharing on the situation in Caroline.
Great. Thanks for having me.
And I see we have our guest from Department of Emergency Response. Welcome.
Hello, Rich. How are you today?
Just great. Thanks for coming.
Last meeting, you had asked that we speak with some of our community partners that we have direct contact with our rapid medical response program. So we have Mike Lockwood here today from the Groton Fire Department. We also have some guests that have zoomed in. We did ask several community partners to join us today. Some of them just weren't able to do it because of the time of day. So maybe in the future, we could just think about how we can maybe bring them in at another time. So I'm not sure how you would you like to start with that, or?
Yes, why don't we do that, because they're here, and,
Okay.
and thank you for the work you did to get us to this moment.
Absolutely. So if it's okay, maybe we could start with Joe going over some of our recent stats, and then we can go into some of the testimony, if that's okay.
Yes.
So on top of the data that's in the TomStat report, I ran some updated numbers. As of noon today, we've answered 770 calls for service. For the month of December, that's 24 of them, and they range from the town of Caroline, Enfield, the town of Ithaca, Newfield, and the busiest is Lansing. As of the month of December, year to date, or month to date, local rescues have been dispatched a total of 15 times, but they've only been able to respond a total of 9 times. So 15 times in the month of December, while the Rapid Medical Response Program was in service, they did not get a local rescue. New York State just released their EMS workforce shortage report, and there's some data that we pulled out of there that's kind of alarming, but ambulance agencies in New York State are seeing a decrease at 9% over the past 10 years of agencies. So we've gone from a little over 1,000 agencies to 982 agencies in New York State as of today. Between 2009 and 2022, New York State saw a decrease in 17.5% of certified providers. We currently have 33,022 certified and active providers in New York State. 62% of EMS leadership in New York State fears that they're not able to recruit to sustain their agency for the future. 97% of New York State providers plan to leave EMS in the next 5 years. The National Association of EMTs is reporting 45% plan to leave across New York State in the next 6 years. 40% of leaders believe that responders are under distress. 32% of New York State providers are unhappy with being an EMS provider. 52% of ambulance agencies use volunteers and report a delayed or missed response because of their unavailability. 49% of paid agencies report an increase by 11% of overtime usage. 73% of New York State responders report working more than 40 hours a week, 23% greater than 61 hours per week, and nationally 60% of first responders work greater than one job. And locally, Tompkins County has seen a noticeable increase in EMS call volume over the last 10 years by a significant amount. We don't have the exact number today, though.
Well, thank you. That's a lot of information very quickly.
Yeah, it was.
Why don't we just pause there if any committee members have question or comment on that? Shauna.
I think it falls within this. I guess I was wondering, we're almost a year into our rapid response. Are there any things that you would change moving forward into the new year, as far as would you offer the services on the weekend, or would you change the hours? Have there been conversations with our partners as to where the gaps are? I would love to hear more about that.
So it absolutely is discussions that we'd be willing to have. You know, as we're approaching the end of our first year, we've definitely seen areas where there are some improvement that could be made, but those are for a bigger discussion.
Okay.
Yeah, because we still see that there's sometimes difficulty in the volunteer rescues being able to respond at night. So we have talked about expanded hours, and we've also talked about weekend hours. You know, we're really asking for the community leaders, you know, especially those that are managing these first response agencies, to help drive that conversation, because we think that's important. But yes, everything that you've asked, we've been talking about internally and also with our community partners.
I think the other question I had was, I did a ride-along, and it was interesting for me to see that it sounds like many of the people that we've hired with the county are actually equipped to do full life-saving, and to some extent, maybe their skills weren't utilized, because it was the people that I was riding with that were experienced and equipped to do maybe more so than some of the other people that were arriving to the scene. And so we get there first, and they're able to do some things, but they did have to wait for other higher life-saving skills to be implemented. And I think that could be frustrating.
The majority of our staff are actually certified as paramedics.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, because we're a basic life support agency, they can't operate as a paramedic. They are still certified EMTs, which is how they're able to apply for the job and get hired for that. But they cannot, other than the knowledge that they may have, they can't physically use the skills as a paramedic.
But it is something that we're talking about as well, and working with our medical director, and we're just finalizing our contract with them for next year. And these are some of the visionary discussions that we're having, because we do have folks that have that skill set. Operationally, it would mean that we'd have to apply for a certificate of need, because right now we're operating underneath an agency number with the state, and that's a big step for us for a number of reasons. But those are discussions that we're having, because I think, as you pointed out, when we have folks that have that skill set and they're there, it would be nice for them to be able to perform those skills.
Thank you.
Yeah. Lee, I think you had something.
From your stats so far, from the standpoint of basic life support calls, do you see any evidence that the county responders are alleviating some of the stress with the ambulance transport services, being able to do sign-offs or initial care and so on, and you know, hold the scene, or at least be able to reroute others to higher priorities?
Yeah, so I don't have the physical year-to-date numbers of that, but like I mentioned in the December numbers, 15 of our 24 calls this month, we didn't get a local rescue. So they were able to respond in place of the rescue. They did cancel an ambulance 3 times so far this month, getting a refusal of medical assistance right there on scene. There's no need for an ambulance to show up, so I was able to keep that ambulance in service.
And Joe, what are our response times?
So our average response time is a little under 9 minutes from time of dispatch to the time of arrival on scene, and our average time for a total call is roughly 30 minutes.
And so when you look at that number of how long it takes us to get there and why we're there, so sometimes we get cleared right away, but sometimes that's because we're still waiting for a transport unit to arrive. We try to clear up as soon as we possibly can, but you know, if they ask for help, we'll stay. But I'm just, that's just something we have to keep in mind, that that's sometimes because it takes a while for a transport unit to get there.
Okay. Well, we have some guests with us today. Oh, Veronica, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, sorry. One question back to those survey stats you reported, or the statewide report. Did you say that 97% of New York State providers plan to leave EMS in the next 5 years?
The 37% of New York State providers plan to leave in the next 5 years. 45% across the nation plan to leave in the next 6.
It's unfortunate.
This report will be in the next Tomstat report. So
It's unfortunate, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
It's unfortunate. There's a lack of parity when it comes to salaries in EMS compared to, say, our fire colleagues or our law enforcement colleagues. So often, folks will use EMS as a stepping stone to enter those other career paths, and sometimes that's driven by just the difference in salary. Even our staff, all of our staff works 2, if not 3 jobs to try to even come close to what some of those other partners make.
So just as an example, they did put in here the average pay. The average hourly rate for a paramedic in New York State is $29.58. The average salary of a firefighter is $35.35. And the average salary of a registered nurse in New York State is $48.14 per hour. So.
Okay. Well, again, let's hear from our guests.
Yeah. If we could start with Mike, because he has another meeting to go to.
Yeah,
Okay,
thanks for coming and visiting with us.
Thanks, Mike.
Okay, I'm Michael Lockwood. I am the first assistant chief and with the Groton Fire Department, and one of my roles is EMS chief, and I'm also an EMT. So I was asked to come in and speak to you about the rapid response program and how it kind of impacts us, and it's unique as in we're not an area that has just a fire rescue. We have our own ambulance service. So I wanted to point out a few things that I've noticed personally in response from our department in regards to the rapid response. So the first one actually occurred about 5 weeks ago. So like this week, it was my duty week, and we were toned out for a lift assist manpower call for what was toned out as a fall. And while our dispatchers do the best they can to gather information to tell us what we're getting into, we never really know exactly what we're getting into. And so this call came in from a woman who said her husband needed assistance, he fell in the driveway, needed help. That's all we know. When our ambulance toned for assistance, I responded from work, and I got on the radio. I just had a weird feeling about the call. It seemed really bizarre. And I said, I got a hold of the ambulance crew and said, is this a lift assist or is this a step it up assist? Meaning, do you need help now? And our ambulance crew got back and said, both, and get me your closest EMS agency vehicle from the county. So I got on, I switched over to Tompkins County and said, whatever you got closest, send them, need them now, which happened to be the rapid response. Ironically, it was a gentleman who has advanced EMT, almost paramedic status that came from the rapid response. A tourniquet was applied to this gentleman, so what turned into a fall call turned into need a tourniquet and we need to get to the hospital immediately. The clock is ticking when a tourniquet is applied in order to save that limb. And that gentleman assisted our ambulance crew in transporting to the hospital. I don't know exactly if the limb was saved. I know the life was saved. I don't know the status of the limb, but that just kind of shows like just some of the bizarre situations that can occur. And thankfully there was a secondary medical agency available close by. We got there almost same time and I was already halfway there. So from my location. I was only minutes away and they pulled in right behind me. So that was pretty critical, and I think that is, really embodies the idea of what this program is about, is just that rapid response. We don't know what we're getting into, could we possibly need more assistance and more resources. So that's pretty critical. The other thing I really wanted to mention, there's 3 things actually. The second thing is back on Friday, November 1st in the evening, all county agencies, all departments responded to the East Shore Drive fire in town of Lansing. And I was there in response with the Groton Fire Department in our tanker and end up in the woods, like most people were, helping put out that fire in the hotspots. But the response from the county in terms of the rapid response, they called all those units in. And that was pretty critical. The amount of first responders there and what we were dealing with, it was, I thought, was kind of made it more comfortable for me as a first responder to know that while I'm listening to an ambulance trying to get to a firefighter that needed medical attention, there was also first responder EMS personnel available to assist, and multiple of them, right? Because we were kind of scattered in that area. So while we talk about in our meetings about mass casualty situations, we never really talked about a mass department response that might require multiple EMS agencies responding. So that was a great use of the rapid response. Thankfully, we didn't really need them, but I mean, that's the purpose, right? I hope we didn't need them because there was a lot of first responders there. And the third thing I was going to talk about, kind of was hitting on already, is the pandemic after the pandemic, the kind of burnout of the EMS providers, particularly in the county. It's no secret that the Groton Fire Department, along with other agencies, are struggling to fill EMS provider roles. We are constantly canvassing the civil service list and talking to people and trying to hire providers to help cover our shifts, and we have not been quite successful with that. And it's, it seems very cyclical, but I think it's kind of a little bit more of that post-pandemic thing, right? And I think that if we hit another pandemic in the next few years, I think EMS is going to burn out entirely. Like they kind of need a vacation from the pandemic, and like they said, a lot of all of our providers work other EMS jobs, whether it's our full-time or part-time providers. They're working other EMS jobs, right? So we have internal conversations. Mr. Shurtleff sits on the committee with me about, are they burning out? Are we going to lose them as well, right? So we've been working, Michael Stitley and Joseph Millman and I, with other agency members, have been working to communicate how can we not only improve our rates and burnout rates, but also how do we get more resources available in this county. We've had a great partnership now with Upstate Medical Center and CMC, bringing in some EMT classes. We're looking at advanced EMT classes. Paramedic classes are a bit more difficult, and it's just kind of configured a little differently, right? But we're trying to look at the whole picture and how do we put all these puzzle pieces together. And it's, I know it's not rapid response related, but it kind of is, right? Because those people are the same people working our agencies. The call I had that I told you about, the fall victim, the gentleman that responded from the rapid response also works in our agency, right? So that was kind of handy to know that person, so our providers know each other and they work together, and that was very comfortable for them to deal with that situation. But it's, again, the same thing as we are facing a big shortage in the county, and it's not a secret, and we don't know the answers, but we're trying to come up with very creative ideas for it.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah. Questions or comments? Sean.
I just want to comment. I know that we've spoken about this before. The November 1st incident, I was driving up Route 13 and I was just speechless at the devastation. And Dewar, as well as the volunteers, the paid, I mean, it was just absolutely miraculous what you guys did. And it's something like, as a community member, it makes me really proud to have you. And it was just a pure exercise in the effort that you do every day. Anyway, I just want you to know your community thinks so highly of you. And thank you.
I just want to point out too that incident, that fire, that was outside of our operating hours. So when they did the all call for all resources, that was a decision that was made by the incident commander that night. We have an all call where every single fire department is requested to respond. And when that was put out, our staff were calling both Joe and I to say, does that include us? So we made a decision to deploy them outside their normal working hours, and 6 of our 9 staff came in. And something that many people don't realize happened that night is Lansing was just doing an amazing job, but they were very busy. So our RMR program stood up and we agreed to answer their rescue calls during the fire so their staff could just focus on the fire. So it was a little off the cuff. It was not something we ever really planned for, but it was nice to see that we were able to collaborate and make that happen.
So those other three were actually already there at the fire with their volunteer fire departments. So all 9 of our staff was there.
Yeah.
But we actually were able to do more than just patient care. We were able to bring food and water out to the firefighters that were out in the woods fighting the fire. So our resources were really put to use that night and into good use.
You know, if I could just put a bookmark on this, at our January meeting, that might be a nice discussion to have, if you could walk us through the timeline of that event, because I think that's a great example of a really serious incident that needed coordination among so many different agencies. Just like to hear more, and we don't really have time for it today, but like to. You got more people on screen?
We do. So joining us on Zoom is Dan Aykroyd from Dryden. So we also have Dan Lamb that sits on the TCOG EMS subcommittee. So maybe we could go to Bill and then we could go to Dan.
Good afternoon. My name is Bill Aykroyd, not Dan Aykroyd, but Bill. He spells it different. Anyway, I am the chairman of the board of directors of both Dryden Fire Department and Dryden Ambulance. And as we usher in 2025, by manner of introduction, it'll be my 40th year in emergency services in Tompkins County. I've seen in that 4 decades considerable change in EMS. It's no secret that EMS nationwide, statewide, and even locally is obviously struggling with all the having to provide a higher level of care with fewer and fewer resources, both financially and from a clinician or provider standpoint. As Mike and Joe have indicated, it's a high burnout rate. It's not a well-paid job. You're seeing people at their very worst. It's difficult to get the right people. We're working on a tiered response system, and we have for years, meaning that the idea is in these rural areas that with only 4 transporting ambulance agencies in Tompkins County, the numerous rescue squads from the fire departments in these rural areas can get there first. Well, we're finding out they're having a difficult time getting on the road and recruiting as well. And, that's why this rapid response program was so critical in getting immediate care to these patients in these rural areas. We don't use it as much in Dryden because we do have 2 24-hour staffed ambulances and several rescue squads that are very good in the township. But they have come to our aid a few times when our ambulances are being pulled and stretched outside our operating territory quite regularly. And when we run short on resources, we've had, in fact, it was Joe himself I'm referring to that happened to respond and was able to fill in and save the day. So it is definitely a great program. It's proactive. It's necessary. It's a solution to address the need for a guaranteed immediate response to rural areas of the county. Start patient care while one of the 4 transporting ALS ambulances are en route. So it certainly is an outstanding program. It's new. I expect to see growth and more responsibility as time goes on. So if anybody has any questions for me, I'll turn it over to Dan.
Why don't we hear from Dan and then we'll go to discussion. Welcome, Dan.
Hey, hello, everyone. So I'm glad we're invited to comment on this. I think it's been about 7 years since Lee Shurtleff declared that the emergency services in this county is collapsing. And that was a wake-up call for a lot of us. It required a lot of study and examination. I got involved in my work at Cornell and had some studies done to help provide some numbers. And it was mentioned earlier that we're losing a lot of our volunteers and professionals in this line of work. The ironic thing is that the demand's going up. And one of the studies my program produced, showed that we had a 20% increase in calls between 2018 and 2022. So the demand locally is going up, but the person power is going down. And that's part of what Lee was talking about when he used his expertise to tell us that the system's collapsing. The good news is, and I really got to commend the county, is that you guys have been paying attention to this and listening. And our TCOG subcommittee started talking about the RMR program about 3 years ago, and made a lot of progress and with a proposal which the county listened and adopted. I know there were a lot of concerns about the funding, and then we got a lot of good luck with the funding, as you all know, and securing close to $1 million in funding to help get this thing off the ground to really prove it. And I think we've been in a really good proving mode, as the numbers that Joe just shared show. 700 calls so far this year, and it's not benefiting my town. I'm a town official, as most of you know, in the town of Dryden, and as Bill just indicated, this isn't self-interest. But what I've wanted to do on this TCOG subcommittee is think more holistically about our system and what the county could do in terms of leadership and filling the gaps. And I just think we've made a lot of progress towards this long problem. And I'll just add that, I spoke to the legislature a couple weeks ago about the essential services legislation and how important that is. And that really is the next step. And we're not alone. This problem's all over New York. It's all over the country. In fact, in Iowa, the counties have been allowed to have a referendum to raise county taxes to provide for essential services for EMS. And about a quarter of the counties in the state of Iowa have publicly voted to support a county tax levy to support EMS services. And that levy ranges between 15 cents per thousand to 75. The town of Dryden has an 80 cent per thousand tax rate for our first services that Bill just indicated. And as we start thinking about reform, I think we need to look at how to share that model countywide. So it's not just a few of the municipalities standing up emergency services that go outside the boundaries. And I'll say this every time I get a chance: a quarter to 40% of an ambulance's calls go outside of the town of Dryden. And that makes my taxpayers donors to the gaps throughout the county. And so we need to keep thinking about how we will extend the service in a more equitable manner, more holistically around the county. And I know you guys are thinking about this, and I appreciate that. And and that's the whole idea behind EMS as an essential service. So we're moving in the direction that we need to go. We just have a lot more progress to make. Thank you.
Okay. Questions or comments for our guests? Thanks for coming in. And Dan, I know you and I have had some discussion about the funding model that sits behind all of this. We're certainly really fortunate to have some grant money funding this for this year and the next, but I think there's more to come in terms of how do we make this continue to function and grow, as I believe we will need to see it grow, but that's for a future day, that discussion. Anyway, Lee.
Well, Rich, you and I sit on the NISAC Public Safety Committee, and I think one of the things that we need to be pressuring them on is adequate reimbursement rates from Medicaid, which is a large percentage of the call volume that's out there. Dan just referenced the 80 cents a thousand that's being levied in the town of Dryden, and I think if you were to extrapolate what we do in the town of Groton under the ambulance contract, it'd be a similar amount. But the thing that makes that significant is those tax dollars are in addition to billing for services to Medicaid, Medicare, private insurance, and private pay by patients. And it tells you that you're about 1/3 short of the cost of providing the service. Insurance does not cover it. The billing to patients doesn't cover it. And the gap is being filled in many areas through the local taxpayer in order to maintain a high level of service. And
Exactly.
one of the other issues is that you get pretty good money out of Medicare, you get good reimbursement out of private insurers like Excelis. You only get $160 on average from Medicaid, and I just use Groton as an example. I think 40% of what we're doing is coming out of tax-exempt facilities, nursing home, subsidized senior citizens apartments, various others that are clients of our system. And you look at a $300,000 budget to keep the rig on the road, and 40% are creating about $50,000 a year.
Yeah.
And that's a horrible model, and we need to keep the pressure on at the statewide level to, and that is an area where the county can have some impact on it to ensure that there's proper Medicaid funding out there for.
Yeah, well, certainly at the NISAC Public Safety Committee, year on year, we've passed resolutions supporting reform in that area and supporting the package of EMS legislation. And oddly enough, the New York State Legislature hasn't just done what we've asked them to do, but we'll keep trying. Sure. But I anticipate this February at NISAC, there'll be a similar push. And I think we absolutely need to just keep doing that. And Dan, thank you for bringing the essential services resolution to our attention. We passed one last May, but it was in combination with a lot of other things. So it's probably good to have some focus on it.
And I didn't mean to leave you out, Shauna. You're active with NISAC too.
Yeah. Michael.
Yeah, just before we move on from the EMS piece, something I wanted to comment on. We were talking earlier about the new OSHA regulations and how that's going to affect our community-based fire services. So that's on our radar. Our fire coordinator has been paying very close attention to that, and we have been discussing this in our bi-monthly fire chiefs meetings. It is a concern of ours and the impact it's going to have specifically on the volunteer community. And this is not unlike what happened in the late 80s, early 90s when the National Highway Traffic and Safety Administration made some significant changes to the recommendations for EMS certification. And when I first started in EMS in 1986, you did not have to be an EMT. You essentially needed first aid, CPR, and a few additional training classes. But in '87, when some of these new mandates came down from the federal government, it really changed the trajectory of EMS across the country. And that's when we started seeing EMS start to move towards the career sector and out of the volunteer sector. So it's not just the training, it's just the standards that are being placed on the volunteer community that don't have, as Lee said earlier, the administrative staff to just deal with some of what has to be dealt with when you're managing an EMS service. Whether you're career or volunteer, you have to you're upheld to the same exact standards. So it's unfortunate, but I think that what we're seeing with these new OSHA regulations will probably have that type of impact on the fire service, the volunteer fire service, the same way that NASTA had on the EMS community back in the early 90s.
More to come there. And again, at a future meeting, it might be really helpful to have your fire coordinator come through and talk with us about these standards.
Absolutely.
Okay, anybody else? Well, thank you for that report. And I'm trying to remember, when did we launch rapid medical response? Was it April 8th?
April 4th, I think.
April 2nd was the first day that we were in service.
So when we get to a full year, I assume we'll be able to look at the program in some detail, and that's what you're thinking about doing?
Yes.
Okay, great. And Mr. Ackroyd and Mr. Lamb, thank you for coming and visiting with us. You're welcome to stay, but this is good to hear from you.
Paper's great.
Okay. Other items for Department of Emergency Response?
I just wanted to bring up that our furniture was delivered today at the 911 center on Brown Road. So the renovations will hopefully be complete as far as the furniture installation by the end of the week. We expect all the radio and computer equipment to be installed the first week of January. We'll have the furniture company here until at least the 18th or the 19th. So we're hoping to bring our staff back from Pine Tree around the 1st of February. So we're pretty excited about that. So, and we'll be able to wrap up that project. So.
Okay. Lee.
As we wrap up the year, just congratulations on the completion of the backup center.
Thank you.
I had an opportunity to stop and visit there one night, and I was impressed with what it turned into, and
thank you.
Glad that it's working out for the interim while you're.
Yeah, it's worked out well. The only outstanding item there is the microwave link lead from there to the Ithaca Tower. We had a few trees that were sort of in the pathway, so we were able to work through that. And once that microwave dish is installed, which works, they applied for the permits about 2 weeks ago. They couldn't do that until they could do a new path study once those trees were, were squared away. But that's it. Once that microwave is installed, then the backup center will be 100% complete. So.
Okay. A note on page 41 of our packet, siren participation seems to be trending exactly where we want it to be. And,
yes.
And I don't know if that's your doing, but I'm going to give you credit.
Well, we're very excited about it, and we're really excited to share a new initiative next year with Siren, where we're going to be able to use another module within RAVE, where community members that either have functional or medical needs will be able to register, and we'll be able to, provide them greater assistance during an emergency. So Jeff will report on that at the beginning of the year, but we're really excited, and that will be a campaign that we'll be deploying next year.
Okay. And then, go ahead, Veronica.
Oh, about Siren, I got a couple emails recently telling me that my Tompkins County Smart 911 account was being discontinued or about to be. And now I can't remember, and that had the Siren logo attached to it. So remind me, is Smart 911 the
I'm not sure.
back-end thing we are using now?
So the version we were using for mass notification when I started was Swift 911, so I'm not really quite sure. I'm going to have to get back to you. But if it had the Siren logo, I'm not really sure why you would have received that notification. So I'll speak with Jeff and see if I can get an answer.
Can answer that probably.
Oh, thank you.
Smart 911 is a piece within RAVE, within our Siren system, and it allows you to input. This is the piece of it that Jeff will be using for the larger campaign next year. It will allow you to input your personal information, whether you have pets and specific things within your house, specific medical needs, all of that kind of stuff. It's alerting you because it's supposed to alert you every 6 months to update your stuff. And if you don't update it, it will just stay the way that it currently is.
That makes a lot of sense. I did click through after verifying that it wasn't a phishing email, now that our IT department has trained us very well in identifying those. But it wasn't, and then it did prompt me with a lot of, can you update this, that, or the other? And I updated some of it. But it looks, I'm excited to hear from Jeff about how it looks on your end when people put in information about here's how to access my building, here's who lives in it, like human or otherwise, here's medical conditions, here's...
It is very comprehensive.
Okay.
Thank you, Jessica.
We do need to keep going because we got some other business we have to get to, but I see you have a resolution authorization for the Tompkins County Department of Emergency Response to enter into a multi-year agreement with Motorola Solutions, Inc. for annual radio communication system support, doc ID 12956. Could I get a motion? Veronica moves, Shauna seconds. Do you want to speak to it?
Yeah, just briefly. So we typically have a 5-year standing contract with Motorola to service our radio system, and that contract expires at the end of the year, so this is our new contract.
And I believe we considered this at budget last year.
We did, yeah. In fact, we actually budgeted more than what we ended up negotiating for the first year and actually for the next 4 years as well.
Okay, questions or comments? Are we ready to vote? All those in favor? And that's unanimous. All right, we're going to have a radio system.
Yes.
There, that's good news. Okay, anything further from the Department of Emergency Response? We have, next up is Department of Probation and Community Justice. But we also have our assigned counsel program. I might have Lance just say a few words. I don't think we've got a lengthy report from there, but I'd like to get it done so we can spend the rest of the time on probation, because I anticipate some discussion there. Lance, welcome.
Sure. Hi, Rich. Hi, everybody. I'll try to be quick and efficient. You have our numbers through November. No real, nothing disturbing that really jumps out. Most of the numbers are kind of tracking. We're kind of returning to our historical norms. Back in the pandemic, if you go back and look at, 2014, 2019, their family court cases are up, which really isn't this committee, but that's our big bugaboo that eats up a lot of money in attorney time. Otherwise, felonies, misdemeanors are on track. Felonies are down the last couple of years, I think, misdemeanors, I misspoke. In part, I think, to probably ATI's changes in how we're handling these lower level types of offenses and having some good responses there. But overall, nothing alarming, in terms of numbers, reflecting things to be concerned about in the community on that. That's the big thing there. And then, of course, next month we have we'll have the shift. I can report on. We have Matthew Davis coming back and kind of wearing two hats. We've been working on the transition, Mona and I, and that should go smoothly. We don't anticipate any issues there on that. Last thing, just a couple of real comments. I know Matt commented on this, but the case, I think we're all familiar with the case. Bail reform was not an issue at all involved in that case. Whatever issues there may be, that's not one of them. I will just note, because I sense a lot of frustration with that case, and having seen cases like this, oftentimes when people are engaged in a pattern of behavior, it's difficult to develop, because they can be smart or clever, to develop it takes a while to develop the evidence to be able to really significantly try to address it, which is frustrating for the people that are targeted. But I've seen this from a couple sides. It makes it difficult. Even if everyone's doing their best. I'll just kind of leave it at that. That's on that. And I'll end there, let you move on with probation.
Well, thank you for those comments, Lance. Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah.
Everybody's trying to do their best there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Any questions or comments for assigned counsel? All right. Well, then let's move on to Department of Probation and Community Justice. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you. How are you today?
Good. And I know you have your general report, but you also have provided us with draft/not finalized policy. And I'd like to make sure we have some chance to talk about that. But is there anything generally you'd want to report to us on?
Sure. I'd like to let everyone know, if you're not aware yet, that our data dashboard has been publicly released. It's available on our website. We did go over that at the CJATI committee at the end of October. Some of the top takeaways from that today, since it's our last meeting of the year. We're currently supervising 18 give cases, 468 adult supervision cases. We've done 357 pre-sentence and pre-plea investigations and filed 86 violations of probation this year versus 104 last year. So our trends numbers-wise remain stable. Our violations of probation are down slightly, but our outcome rates are still less, they're lower than we'd like to see them for successful outcomes. So we're exploring some of the rationale reasons that may be contributing to that. Wanted to mention that our most recent hire from February of 2024 will be completing her basic course for peace officer at the Broome County Training Academy starting next week through the latter part of January of 2025. And just mention, well, some thanks to the police agencies involved in Cops, Kids, and Toys. On November 30th, there was a Fill the Truck event up at Shops at the Mall in front of Target. And thank Chris Allinger and WQNY for the advertising they get for us. It was probably the best turnout we've had in a long time from police agencies. There were several officers from IPD, Sheriff's Department, Groton PD, the troopers, Ithaca College, Public Safety, and Cornell. So the toys will be given out this week, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday at the Shops at Ithaca Mall. Just a reminder to the families that may have applied to pick up the gifts.
Okay. Questions, comments on all of that, or do we want to go to the policy? Go ahead, Shauna.
I actually just wanted to say thank you to Dan and his staff. It sounds like you guys really picked up and helped out our DSS friends put together our shelter. And that was definitely outside of the realm of your job description, and I just want to say thank you.
You're very welcome. Tyler Mix and Bill Apgar, very, very dedicated, happy to do anything to help out the county and the community, so we're appreciative of the opportunity.
Okay. Why don't you just, you and I have had a chance to talk about this draft policy, and I'd note that there's a parallel opportunity. We're trying to collect community input. Lisa, is that the case?
That is, I believe Dan is going to be speaking to that, but that is happening.
So that's going on at the same time, but I did not want this committee to sit on its hands. So this is an opportunity for us to just discuss. We will not be voting today, but maybe you could just talk about the method that you used to put this together. Where did you get the draft document, and what did you do to it to amend it?
Okay. After exploring several policies from several different probation departments in New York State and outside of New York State, it seemed most appropriate, since we were crafting a lot of our own specific language to Tompkins County, to build off of the Sheriff's Department's policy, which as an accredited agency, their policies and procedures are rock solid, meet the professional standards that we're looking for. And since we will be working in conjunction with the Sheriff's Department and IPD as give partners, it makes sense that we're trained the same way and that we're following the same policies and procedures to the best of our ability. There are some carve-outs in here in section C. Under what circumstances they'll be able to carry. So one of the things that made this challenging in a good way was most probation departments that carry, like police agencies, if they're authorized to carry, they carry a firearm while they're on duty. Where what I've gathered from the full ledge meeting and public safety is that we're not, and from my own vision of the policy and practices, is that we would not be carrying in the office and we would not be carrying in the field all the time, and it would only be specific officers who are trained and authorized to carry. So section C of the policy is sort of brainstormed through my senior staff team for the situations, proposing the situations under which our armed officers would be authorized to carry in the field. Some of them are clear cut. Anytime we're working, supervising a gun-involved violence elimination qualifying offense, when conducting field assignments with give partner agencies, conducting searches of a residence, business, individual, when conducting field work that is identified as high risk based upon a case conference. So this is where we needed to really creative, and we're varying from the way that most probation departments in New York State operate with armed officers with the intention of being intentional on when and how we authorize individuals to carry in those gray area situations. So I'll give you an example. We have 18 individuals currently under supervision on our gun-involved violence elimination detail. That doesn't cover individuals who've committed gun crimes in other counties and then transferred here, because if you're not a give county, you're not going to sentence the person as a give offender. But the individual's behavior is still as concerning as it would be if they were sentenced here for the same thing, but they don't have those conditions. Perfect example. We got an individual from a neighboring county just last week, criminal possession of a weapon fourth, 2 separate incidents of criminal contempt second, and 1 burglary second, 4 probation terms. The individual resides here, so we have to accept the case. That's an individual that I have safety concerns sending my officers to go visit, but they don't qualify as a give offender because they were sentenced outside of Tompkins County. So looking at the section C4 and then beyond all the way to D is our effort to provide an opportunity for officers to request to be armed on certain field work where they have safety concerns. And it would be a review process between the probation director and at least 2 supervisors or the deputy director through a case conference where we're asking the officers to articulate the justification for why they feel the need to be armed conducting that field work. And then we'll make a determination based upon the factors that are safety factors that are present, whether or not to authorize that. That's what I'm hoping to do.
Why don't we stop there and just give committee members a chance to comment or question as to that section C, because that's pretty hefty part of the policy. Veronica.
Thanks, Dan. I like a lot of this, and that what you just said about the case conference review form and things, that makes sense and seems clear to me. I'll also note I like that you're getting public input in parallel with this. I have 2 or 3 questions about this section. Well, the easiest one is later on the bottom of the next page in bold. It says probation officers who have been authorized to carry a firearm will carry the firearm concealed from public view with the exception of circumstances outlined in section C sub 1 and 2 of this policy. And so just to clarify, that's referring to the section C we're just talking about under policy as opposed to the section C's later on under other headings?
Yes. So that would be, they would carry concealed unless they were doing an operation with another give partner agency or working with a give offender. Actually, it should include 3 as well, where we were conducting an authorized search of a residence or business, because we would be doing that in conjunction with law enforcement. So in the instances in which we're operating with a police agency, it's already known that there's law enforcement there because law enforcement officers are there in uniform. So it wouldn't be a question of us being able to protect whether or not a person was on probation or whether or not there was a legal concern, which is what we try to do when we do our normal field work, dress in plain clothes, we drive unmarked vehicles or our own personal vehicles. We're not showing up to embarrass people and out them as being on probation. But in certain circumstances, in those circumstances, we would want to carry concealed but also be identifiable. So another part of the policy, when we do any field work, we submit a field work plan to the Department of Emergency Response, and we would indicate in that field work plan whether or not any of the officers were armed. So if there ever was a call from a concerned community member, oh, there's a guy in my driveway with a gun, they would potentially at doer be able to identify that that's a probation officer doing a check and assuage the person's concerns if they're carrying concealed. We do want to be identifiable, so I would, in the other circumstances where we're with police, we do have bulletproof vests that have a probation placard that we'll wear on the outside of our clothing in certain circumstances, but we don't have any clothing that would identify us in a less obvious manner to the community. So I'm looking towards a jacket or something that would say probation clearly on it to let people know.
I see this mentioned just slightly later in the policy. Is this saying this bit about probation officers who have been authorized to carry a firearm will wear a piece of clothing and their identifying them as a probation officer and their department badge anytime they are conducting armed field work? And so is that any armed field work regardless of whether the gun is initially concealed?
Yeah, so in the instances where we're dressed in plain clothes, they have a badge they can wear around their neck with their identification, just so people can hopefully identify them as a person in position of authority or law enforcement. But also in other circumstances, they would need potentially an article of clothing that says probation across the back if we're not wearing our vest on the outside of our clothes, which we do when we operate with the police.
Right. And then, so I did have an additional question in Part C. Well, one, I was going to ask about conducting field assignments with give partner agencies, which you mentioned. So are all the give partner agencies themselves law enforcement agencies?
The only give partner agencies are the district attorney's office, who we don't do field work with, Ithaca Police, and the Tompkins County Sheriff's Office.
Okay. Would it be it sounds like including the assignments with partner agencies as a situation where probation officers are authorized to carry a firearm makes sense when the agencies are like our police or sheriff agencies that are already like showing up in uniforms that the general public would look at and expect there to be guns involved. Is it worth specifying that in the policy, like specifying field assignments with give partner law enforcement agencies or something, even though in practice you're not going out with district attorney staff in the field?
To actually name the departments, is that what you're saying?
Either name the departments or name that you're talking about law enforcement department. I don't know what
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Because people don't understand what give partner agencies is. I'd be happy to change that to make it clearer.
Yeah.
Would it be acceptable to expand that out to Ithaca City Police Department, Tompkins County Sheriff's Office, or other police agency? Because there may be occasions where the troopers go, or we're working with the village police department, something of that nature.
Okay. That would make sense to me.
Okay, thank you.
And my last question, but number 3 doesn't sound like it necessarily has to be, as written, give related or like violent offender related at all.
Sorry, I'm not.
The item C3.
Okay.
The situation of conducting authorized searches, it doesn't sound like it's necessarily related to give clients or violent offenders. So can you clarify?
It would not necessarily be when we're working with a give offender. Most of the searches or search orders that we request deal with a firearm, because there's an immediate need to try to remove that firearm in the interests of community safety. But I would prefer to not be handcuffed, for lack of a better term, to only doing that in circumstances where it's a give case, given the example I provided earlier with the individual transferred here who has a history of weapons possession and violence. If that individual if we had information that led us to believe that individual had a firearm that needed to be removed per their conditions, I would like to send armed officers to do that, just as I would with a give client.
And the search warrant the court would sign would indicate this. Yeah.
it's a search order. It's specific to the criminal procedure law that allows probation to ask, to inform a court what the concerns are, tie it to the violation of the conditions the court has ordered, and ask for specific permission to conduct a search at that residence.
With armed?
Armed, yes.
Yes. Okay, Lee, I think you had questions.
More comment than question.
Comment. Okay.
I just want to say that reading this, it's far more stringent than I would have anticipated when we had the initial discussions. You've outlined a very extensive process to get to the point of somebody being armed when they go out on work-related activity, and it looks to me like it limits your discretion as the department director. It's more or less a committee decision as to whether somebody's going to be authorized to carry, and that's my comment in reading it, and I hope it's manageable for you, because I think this is really tight, and that should alleviate some of the concerns that have been expressed. But by the same token, I hope it's manageable for you.
I appreciate that. I do recognize that it can potentially be limiting, but I think it would alleviate community concerns that it's an authoritarian decision, that it's just whoever the probation director is saying yes or no without oversight and counsel with other members of the department. I would like to say, to Veronica's point, we have not done community review of this policy. I believe I was clear when I stated when we discussed it in the full legislature meeting that I really needed to develop the policy to law enforcement standards and then accept feedback from the community. I have not gotten any feedback from the community. I've not had community meetings about this. There are people who are doing that, and I expect feedback. We're just trying to draft a professional policy that fits the desires of the community for us to do this on a limited basis, which I think makes sense. There's also, as part of the worksheet for that, it sort of requires us to consider other options to an armed response. So if it's a matter of a crime, should it be probation going out by themselves armed to try to address that? Or is that something that we should bring a police agency in on, or turn over to a police agency if it's not clearly a probation issue and it's more a police issue? But I like a lot of aspects of the intentionality of it and trying to have room to cover those gray areas and just not completely just be locked in on give cases, because we're putting in a lot of, we're supervising a lot of individuals who have violent criminal histories, struggling with substance use issues, struggling with mental health concerns, who can be violent and unpredictable. And if we're going to have officers who are armed to enhance our safety and public safety, I think we need to have some leeway in how they're utilized, but also not just willy-nilly be arming people and they can just go out in the field armed anytime they want to.
Okay. Shauna.
Thank you. I definitely have concerns on the community engagement, because I think that's a really big piece of this is listening to our community, hearing the people that have been impacted through probation and through our legal system. And so that is something that I think we need to hear more about. The plans, who you've talked to, who you've received feedback from. My understanding is that the policy was going to be created, but there was going to be that feedback. I think something that I haven't asked in the past is, why haven't we considered why haven't we considered like tasers?
Well, we'll have to develop a less than lethal tool to use in conjunction with the firearms policy, because you have to as part of the use of force continuum. Tasers are expensive, for one. It would probably cost more to, I believe it would cost more to have 7 tasers than it would for the entire rest of this proposal. I think they run about $6,000 a piece. My intention would be to go with OC spray or pepper spray as a less than lethal option. I'm considering making that potentially available to other officers who would not be armed because it would give them some tool. Issue is if you issue someone OC spray, you also have to train them in handcuffing techniques and other things, because you can't disable somebody with pepper spray and then allow them to flail around. You have to actually take custody of them. The same would be true of a taser deployment, as well as, physical health checks, getting EMS there, helping the person decontaminate if they're sprayed with OC. There's definitely other considerations. As far as the community input piece, I think I've been clear. I want to be responsive to the community, but I'm not going to be able to draft a firearms policy that makes opponents of the policy happy. I just can't. There's no way to do that. It's a very difficult situation to try to make everyone happy with a policy. I also would like to note that I'm not aware of any other policy in any other department in the Tompkins County that's received this level of scrutiny or request for community input. I know that this warrants it, but we cannot, I need you to legislate on whether or not you want us to be armed, and it's sort of a yes or no given the parameters. But I can't take every single community member's input into how to do this. There's already established standards on how to do it correctly. So it makes it a mission impossible for making everyone happy.
Yeah, and I think we recognize we can't make everybody happy. I certainly would like to hear the community input, but my understanding was we weren't burdening you with that. Your job was to do what you've done here. You've created the policy. And I'm not quite sure how we're proceeding with getting the community input. Lisa, who is doing that? And
I think we need to have another discussion, because my understanding was that the probation director was going to be involved with that.
I think he was going to participate, but he wasn't organizing it.
I am happy to participate. That was my understanding. I know that there are other legislators who are discussing this with community partners, and I'd be happy to participate in those conversations when they're ready to bring me in. I don't want to. I don't want to participate in the conversation and be a detractor from people being able to speak their minds.
I know there have been other policies that have gotten a lot of attention, and I don't want to get into a sort of ranking of intrusiveness on policy creation. This is one where we should get community input, but at the same time, the Public Safety Committee should be moving this forward to making a decision, and I do not want people sitting on their hands and just running the clock on this. I would like to have us think about, we will put this on our agenda to take a vote at our January meeting, because it's going to be the same committee at that point, and after that point, we don't know who's going to be on public safety, but we've already had a fair amount of time for that community input to be organized. We'll have another month, but I'd like to give fair notice that my view is we should be voting on this in January. Veronica and then Mike.
Mona has her hand.
Yeah. I was going to say, I know that the Community Justice Center Advisory Board did receive a copy of this policy. I see Mona's got her hand up, but I wonder if maybe she's not a panelist yet.
So I don't know. Mona,
I wasn't able to go to the CJC Advisory Board meeting, so I don't know what was discussed, but Mona's here.
Yeah, let's see if she can speak to us. Hi, Mona. Are you able to hear us? You're on mute. There you go.
Yep, I can hear you. Sorry. I don't have my camera on because I'm in the car going from one hub to the next. But I would like to share that I did receive the policy last week from a different person from the legislature. I shared it out with our advisory group. I've been back in contact with that person, and we are hoping to set up a meeting for next week to invite Dan to come and have conversation. There was some feedback from some community members that were able to take a look at it with a clear understanding that it's a draft, it's confidential. I would go out on a limb and speak for the community and say that we don't expect the policy to be changed. We just want to be able to provide the input that we have, and then Dan will take that input and make whatever changes he deems necessary. I don't think that we're trying to control this. It's been voted on. It's going to happen. The community just wants to be heard, wants their concerns to be heard. So we are working on it. I didn't get it until last Tuesday. We met on Wednesday. It was mentioned at our community healing on Thursday. So we did have a little bit of conversation about that. And here we are at Tuesday again. So we're working on it. And we're trying to bring as many community members together as we can and hopefully meet with Dan next week.
Mona, that's great. And by the way, it has not been voted on. So this is still, but that would be great. And if I could ask, when you do get it scheduled, if you could just include the Public Safety Committee members on the notice so that if anybody wishes to attend as well to hear what's said, I think that would be a positive thing.
Absolutely.
Okay. And then Mike, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, Dan, that I think the policy looks great. It's actually more restrictive than I would have made it. So, I mean, for what it's worth. And I would love to move this forward in January and kind of get it rolling. So.
Okay, well, it does sound like we have a plan, and we're running out of time.
May I speak quickly to Mona Lita?
Yeah, Dan.
I thank you for your review, and I would love to meet with you. I do need to tell you that I just received a jury summons for Ithaca City Court starting Monday, so I may be on the hook as a juror from Monday to Thursday of next week, but I can meet in the evenings or later in the day if I do wind up getting selected for the jury.
Hey, if you get selected, thank you for your service.
Thank you. I'll do everything I can.
Okay, anything further on this item? Veronica.
Just briefly, could we make the language in it gender neutral? Instead of his and her in places, just say their?
Sure, especially as it refers to like the director.
Yeah.
Yeah, his or her. Absolutely, I would have to do
Or well,
that.
it does say his or her a lot. I'm wondering, could it just say
There.
there? Yeah.
Yep, I would make that change. I appreciate that feedback.
Thank you.
Good point. Okay. Anything else from probation?
No, I appreciate all the consideration that people have given this. I know it's a heavy topic, and it deserves the scrutiny that it has gotten and the assistance from multiple partners, and I appreciate your willingness to continue to consider it.
Okay. Well, with that said, I think we are ready to adjourn, except I'd just like to say thank you to everybody, to the committee members and all the department heads and personnel that have stuck with us all year and helped try to keep our community safe. I hope everybody has a good holiday. So consider a motion to adjourn. Or Lee, did you have something? Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Let's adjourn. Thank you.